Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the New Construction Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Anya Chrysanthon, and I'm really excited to introduce my guest for today, Michael Ciorrocco, or his friends call him C-Roc, since his last name is a bit difficult to pronounce, just like mine. Michael is a motivator, facilitator. He's a dynamic public speaker, a fierce friend, and a coach. So welcome to the show, Michael. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Anya. Very excited to be here on the New Construction Marketing Podcast with you, and hope to share some great content with you and your listeners.
Yes. So, Michael, we like to kick things off by giving our listeners a little bit of a background on who you are, what you do now, how you got to where you are.
Well, I'll tell you, I run a division for mortgage division for Nations Lending, and that's not where it started, obviously. One of the things that about me, and like I said, my friends call me C-Roc, is I've had a fire lit in me at a young age. And I got to share this with you because it'll give you an idea where I come from. But I believe everybody has a story. And my story started back when I was about 11 years old. I lived with my dad. I came from a broken home, like a lot of people that I talk to. And so a lot of people can relate to this probably, where you go to one parent's every other weekend and one parent has primary custody. So I lived with my dad for about 3 years and broke my mom's heart moving there. And went through some emotional, physical abuse while I was there. And I was mature enough at 11 years old to realize that I had enough. And I talk about culture a lot. And at that age, I didn't know the word culture, but I knew that that was an environment that I shouldn't be in. Mm-hmm. It wasn't conducive to success as a kid would view success or happiness. So I told my mom about this, that I wanted to move back with her. And I came home from school one day, and my dad had an envelope, a legal envelope. And he said, "Son, what is this?" And I walked on eggshells in that house. And, I didn't want to admit to what it was at that point. So he said, "Go sit in your room." Now, my dad was my hero. Okay. And he had a masonry business. He always had a big wad of $100 bills in his pocket. And he would take it out when we'd go somewhere and, make a scene about it. And, that, as a kid, I looked up to that. It wasn't about the paper of cash, but it was what we got with that. And I always looked up to him about that. It's just a little memory I have of that. And but that's important to the story because when he came in the room at that moment, he opened the paper and said, "Hey, this says you want to move back with your mom." And I admitted, "Yeah, I do." And I'd had enough. And he said, "Okay, so that's what the case is." So he takes this $100 bill wad out of his pocket that I always looked up to him for. Again, it wasn't about the cash. It was about what we could get with the cash. Mm-hmm. And he peeled off the $100 bill, crumpled it up, and threw it at me. And mind you, I'm an 11-year-old kid at this point. And he said, "You know what? You're going to need this when you're living on the streets with your mother one day." So that's an important part of my story because of the fact that at that moment, and I'm 42 years old right now, I can remember as clear as day, I thought to myself, I can't be the only person that this is happening to, where someone, their father, has given up on them. And you know what? I made a decision at that moment not to play a victim, but just take that and grasp it and run with it by helping others who've been given up on. So I didn't have a really good direction as far as target or how I was going to do it. I just knew that that's what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment at 11 years old on, whether it was school, sports, my jobs, or friends, I always wanted to help them and help first. And then things always turned out and worked well after that. So I learned that at a young age. And but a lot of people have been given up on. And what they do is they play the victim role instead of the victor role, the fact that they made it through that situation. And I had it good. I could have had a lot worse life, but, that's just a moment and a turning point in my life that I can remember and point to. And that's what I like to teach people about using past experiences. So over the years, I've gotten into the real estate and mortgage world. I have 30 employees that work with me now. And about 2017, I was coaching them and we had a sales meeting. And I thought to myself that night, you know what? Why am I limiting myself to just these 30 people? I can share my story with millions of people and inspire a lot of other people. Because one thing about the business, we're, obviously, there's competition between companies, but we never look at things that way. We'll help everyone. And we know there's enough business out there. And then we really focus from there on dominating, not competing. So anyway, that gives you a little bit of a background where I came from. Long story short.
Yeah, so sounds like you're keeping more of like abundant mind in mind when you're sharing your story and helping others, even though they may be your quote unquote competitors.
That's
So
right.
let me ask you this. A lot of people have had traumatic childhoods or something happened to them. And I think usually it goes one of two ways. They either go the path that you chose, which is it lights this fire under them and they really seem to accelerate and become exceptional, or it goes the other way where they take the complete opposite and basically become drug addicts and, you know, take on a kind of a go in a wrong path. So why do you think you chose the path that you chose at 11 years old? How did you decide, like, okay, I'm not going to be a victim, I'm going to be the victor and I'm going to help others, instead of just being like, well, my dad doesn't love me, or my dad this or that? How were you able to overcome that at such a young age?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I had a lot of people in my family, aunts, uncles, whatever, that had drug problems, had alcohol problems. I sat back and watched it, and I'm very observant.
Mhm.
And at that young age, I watched that, and I would always ask my mom, why is so and so doing that? Why are they in that situation? Now, by the way, let me clarify something. I'm not perfect. I went to college and had fun, partied, and always had this ambition, but I didn't have a target. And I'm big on targets. And I didn't have a path to what I wanted to do. So sometimes when you're in that mode, then you're trying to help people, but you may be trying to go the wrong route with helping people. So I had to work my way through this, and I feel like I've perfected this now. So over the years, and it's taken me some time. So if somebody has gone through that and has played the victim role for a while, there's nothing saying that you got to stay in that position. You can get out of it. It's never too late until it's over. And so as far as me learning that, I watched and observed my family members and found out reasons why are they in those situations and what can I do to help them. And over in the past, I mean, I lost a grandmother to suicide because she was dealing with those things of a rough childhood. And I
Mhm.
thought to myself, I'm not going through that. I tried to help her as much as I could, but I said, I'm just not going to choose that route. I'm going to choose another route and then help people and guide them to that and what to look for and what to watch for, key indicators that they're going in the wrong direction. So that's kind of where I got it from, is just watching family members and, just asking those questions.
How's your relationship with your dad now?
So unfortunately, my dad and I don't talk, not by my choice. But again, I don't play the victim role with that. One thing I, not out of spite, but I always say I'm not going to let him win. So I'll still reach out to him on his birthday, text him. I'll still do the things that I think are right, regardless of a response.
Mhm.
And so again, it's just part of, I'm stubborn in a way. I'm not going to let him win. But also I want to provide a good example for my kids. So I use this, and I have a 13-year-old son and a 7-year-old daughter, and I don't shy away from sharing this stuff with them. And I want to make sure that they learn from things that I've been through. And, so that's what I use. And I want to be a good example for them and anybody that I'm involved with, my employees, my partners, my wife, everybody. I got to provide a good example and be the person that they would want to be around, so
Yes.
that's the way I look at that.
Love that. So, you guys, Michael and I thought of a topic that we wanted to share with you today. And I think this is kind of a perfect transition into that. So, we're going to talk about how to recover and rebound from a setback. So, obviously, Michael has had a rough childhood and he was able to overcome that. Now, we as salespeople sometimes go through crazy experience, right? It's a lot of highs, but it's also a lot of lows, and sometimes we get into that low spot. Maybe the sales are just not coming your way and you seem to be doing everything that you're supposed to do to get out of that rut, and everyone else is selling and you're not, and you get to start thinking, well, maybe this is all a mistake, maybe this was some kind of a fluke and I got lucky, and really I'm just not good at sales and I'm not meant for it. Or sometimes we get into situations with customers and our builders where we could make a mistake. As you know, going from community to community, there's lots of different plans, different options. And sometimes when you select certain option with another option, you may not realize that the two don't actually jive together, may not work together. And that may not come up until the actual construction. And then oopsie daisy, remember that very important fireplace that you had to have in your home. Well, guess what? We can't put it in, or something happens where you represent something to your customer and suddenly that's not possible. And we begin to feel awful because you are the leader. You made that representation to your customer. They trust you, and now you let them down. So not only you feel like a failure, a liar, and just awful about that mistake, but also you begin to feel terrible for your builder, because now how do you face the builder? You made this costly mistake. They may need to pay for that mistake, and you begin to feel down on yourself. And every time you see the builder, you start to apologize to them over and over again. And it becomes this cycle where instead of moving on and feeling good and moving past that mistake and learning about it or from it, it's kind of like you're in a vicious cycle of feeling down on yourself. And the more you feel down on yourself, the more self-conscious you begin to feel. And the more self-conscious you begin to feel, the more prone you are to making a mistake. So it's kind of, how do you get out of that cycle? Because I think at one point or the other, we've all been there.
Yep. And I get it, guys. I've been there. I'm still in sales now, despite my position. I'm still in sales. I believe everybody's always selling. But I've been there before. I started out back in the day in in-home sales, selling water treatment systems, and you'd have to close the deal that night, handling objections, going through streaks, the roller coaster ride that we have in sales that you try to not have big, but just a little bit like this. And one thing I always look at, though, is I always want to have the graph moving up. So you have roller coasters, that's fine. Don't have big dips, but always over time have a graph that's going up. And there's a couple ways to achieve that. But as far as setbacks and recovering from setbacks, there's big ones and there's small ones. And what I mean by that is if you make a mistake and it costs a little bit of money, that's smaller. Or you go through a streak where you're not selling as much, that's a little smaller. There's others where we had a situation, to give you an example, where, and I just want to share this so you can relate to what you're talking about. I had to move 22 employees in 3 branches from a company to a brand new company and start from scratch. And so I can speak on that part, that's the big setback, right? And I know what to do. So first of all, we always look at targets, and we use targets big time. We set a target, which is our intention, and that is how we get to our main big goals that we have. And the real thing as far as sales goes, if sales aren't happening as often or as abundant as you'd like, you have to look at where your goal is and what your targets are, and making sure that you're never lowering your target, but always shooting for the target. And then you work backwards from that. Mm-hmm. And you work back the numbers. So, if you have to get a sale, X amount of sales in a period of time, how many calls does that take to get that? And then what do you have to do to get that many calls? And you just work the numbers back. And sometimes people overcomplicate things. So you just break it simple. So I can talk more on that in detail. That's just as far as sales. And the 3 reasons salespeople don't sell. When you have a streak of sales and you're doing well and all of a sudden it drops off, I always talk to my people about going home, looking in the mirror, and ask themselves 3 questions. And there's only 3. It's very simple. 1, are you working and putting the time in? Mm-hmm. And this is something that I do when I do have a setback. I always look and say, okay, what am I doing wrong? I do like a self-reflection. Am I putting the time in is 1. Number 2, how's my attitude? Is my attitude off, right? It could be one of these 3 things, or it could be a combination of them. So those 2 things, are you working hard? Is my attitude right? The third one is, am I on the program? And what I mean by that is, no matter where you are working or what you're selling, there's a program of how you're supposed to go about doing it, right? Promotion and marketing and advertising, and then presenting, and then closing, and then follow up. So if you're not doing that and on the program, no matter how hard you work, how great your attitude is, you're not going to sell. So I always try to keep things simple and relate back to those 3 things and reflect on those. And it's corrected at every time if I am truly honest with myself. And I tell my employees, if you're truly honest with yourself with these things, you're going to fix the problem. Now, on the other hand, salespeople's biggest problem is people don't know who they are or what they're trying to sell. So a lot of times people will look, and I've been there before, guys. So I'm not, I'm not new to this topic. And Anya, you understand that if nobody knows you, then they're not going to be able to buy from you. And if nobody knows your product, they're not going to be able to buy from you. So one of the things that cures a lot of issues is promote. And when you think you've done enough promoting, promote more. Prospecting, and spend most of your time on those money-making activities. Because if you have enough customers, enough prospects, enough leads, you can overcome some customers that are more difficult to deal with. You can overcome some mistakes. You can overcome a lot of things when you have numbers. So I always look at and talk to my people about anything in small numbers that are good for you is no good. In a business, you need people. You need a lot of people. In sales, you need a lot of prospects and leads. In the bank, you need a lot of money. But you need a lot. I mean, that's a big thing. So people need to start thinking bigger on the front end of things.
And you guys, so today I actually had somebody reach out to me and they said, hey, I'm in this rut and, I'm in a community that is almost sold out. And what can I do to kind of start kicking things up? So I gave her kind of 10 things that you can do. And again, I think activity generates activity, right? The busier you are, and I don't mean staying busy, because sometimes certain busy activities really are not the activities that are going to generate the traffic that you want. But I gave her 10 solid ideas that will generate the traffic. And so a couple of the things that I'd like to mention, you guys, because we are definitely getting into that slower time of the year, November, December. You may not be seeing the traffic that you're used to seeing. So one mistake I think a lot of new home salespeople make is that they don't reach out to their past buyers. That's something that real estate agents do really well typically, right? They say that I'm a realtor for life. But with new home salespeople, for whatever reason, we're more thinking transactionally. So think about the opportunity. And I'm sure it's the same thing in your business, Michael, like with the mortgage referral. Like you would think, okay, these people just bought a home. Why would I nurture this lead now? I mean, they just bought a house. It's not like they're going to turn around and buy another house. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we always talk about creating our own economy.
Yes.
So I don't want to hear that November, December, January is slower. I don't really care about that. That's for other people to worry about. One thing that we talk about is when we create our own economy is how can I get numbers up on the prospecting side? And one of the big ways we do it here is we attack our past client database, and attack might be a negative word, but that's how we feel. We're attacking it. And we have a strategy with that where we will email them every so often. It doesn't have to be about the topic of a house, for example. It could be anything, just to touch and get in front of them. We actually create Facebook audiences off of our past client database, and then we'll market to them on Facebook. We have a text campaign that we do every so often, and the exact method and replication of that is, or how often, frequency of that is something I can talk about later. But we send mail to them consistently, and of course we phone call them. So that we believe there's a 5-prong attack to our database. And if you do that properly, you will get, and it depends on what products you have too, because if they have a limited number of houses left, that can be hampering things, but they got to figure out that if they want to stay in that situation or find another community to work in, that's a totally different topic. But if you get your database and you're working, I think that for every 100 people that you have in your database, you should be able to get 3 per month if you work at the 5-prong attack. We teach that to realtors. By the way, I work with realtors too. We don't just go and ask them for business. We try to help them grow their business and really focus on that. That's a big deal. But and then as far as pipeline, if you have people in your pipeline right now building a house, every single time you talk to them, you should end the call with, oh, by the way, do you know anybody else that could possibly be interested in a new construction that I could give some honest help to? And then just be quiet. And what's the worst that can happen? They say, no, I don't have anybody.
Yep.
Or the other hand is, yeah, they may have someone, Or they say, no, I don't have anybody right now, but you know what? I'll keep it in mind. And then that becomes top of mind for them, right on the front of their brain. And when they go to a social or church or family function or whatever, you're remembered at that moment, and they're going to bring it up. And that's got to happen. And we call that just asking. And so every call in our business, to give you some relation to that, I have processors that aren't salespeople or loan officers, right? But we've gotten them licensed because we want them in our organization to make as much money as they are willing to make, and there's no limitations. So that's taken the roof off of our business, where we've increased our business by 400% year over year. That's a big number, guys. I said 400%. But our processors are producing and bringing in revenue to the company, not just the loan officers. So in effect, they're covering their salaries. So our business doesn't have a salary, so to speak, for those support staff. So we have them asking for business when they're on the phone with someone. They're calling a title company. They're calling an insurance company. Hey, oh, by the way, do you know anybody that might be buying or selling in the next 6 months? And they just be quiet. And then the magic happens after that. So, but it's got to happen consistently. And the only reason that you're not doing it is you haven't committed to being the best and producing the best. It all starts with a target and a commitment. And that's where we always start with salespeople, real estate agents, loan officers, is what are we going to be shooting for? If you're shooting a gun, you need to have a target. And then you got to commit to that target all out, and then doors start opening up for you magically. I don't know how to explain it, why it happens, but when you commit to something, your thoughts, actions, emotions, everything leads towards your target.
Yes, it's like the universe conspires to help you, right?
Yep.
One of my favorite books is The Alchemist. I don't know if you read that one.
Yep.
Yeah. So whenever I feel down, sometimes I do reread this book, because it does remind me that I'm on the path. And as long as I'm committed to finding my calling and I'm pursuing that, even if I fail, it's okay, because at least I can say at the end of the day that I tried, instead of, oh, well, I just stayed stuck in whatever I was doing, even though I wasn't loving that. So,
right. Anya, one thing with this, first and foremost, you have to take 100% responsibility.
Yes.
No matter what happens, you got to figure out a way of how you were responsible for it. And if you do that and you're not pointing fingers and blaming, the people that you work for, the builder or what have you, or your customers, will be more understanding. And you have to be in an environment where you're allowed to make mistakes too, because nobody's perfect. So if you take 100% responsibility and you have a good conversation with whoever you work for and your customers, that if something happens, look, I'm going to do everything I can. Something happens, I'm going to take responsibility for it. We're going to get it fixed. But also you have to have that culture of being able to make that mistake. And then also I like talking to the borrower or the buyers and explaining to them that this is a process that's never perfect. We will try our hardest and set the expectations properly up front and say, as we go through this, there's going to be some things that happen maybe that you're not ready for, not expecting. Let's keep an open mind and just coach them. And that doesn't happen on the front end. And so, of course, if something happens as you go through the process, something comes up and then it's a big deal.
Yes.
So that's a big deal as far as the mistakes that happen or things that come up.
You guys know we live in the age of HDTV, and on TV, they make new construction sound so easy, right? There's never any problems. They come in, they boom, boom, build the house in 3 days. Voila, it looks amazing. And it's all smooth sailing. So, of course, it's so important to set the expectations and coach your customers through that process, that's not the reality that they're portraying on TV, because so many customers are watching it and they really have that expectation that it's just going to be perfect. They have an expectation of a perfect house, that it's going to be factory built, no human mistake goes into it. So I think it's the key that you do set that expectation. And if you don't have that conversation up front, when something happens, it's a lot more difficult to to make it right, rather than having that expectation up front that, hey, things could go wrong, but guess what? We're going to take care of that. We're going to make it right. So when something does happen and you make that phone call to your client, you can say, guess what? Remember how I told you? Well, it's happening right now. So, but here's what we're going to do about it. And one cool thing that I heard, and I don't know if you heard that, Michael, but they did customer studies, and studies actually show that if you have a customer and you made a mistake with that customer, but you were able to handle the mistake and make it right in a way that was satisfactory to that customer, they actually are more likely to become loyal customers to you and refer business to you than customers who just had a regular experience without a mistake taking place. So I thought that was really interesting. So when you think about something going wrong with your customer, remember that and think about it as an opportunity to create a raving fan instead of just having a regular customer. I thought
Yep.
that was so cool.
Yep. 100%. You want to look, and as you get bigger, if you do have big targets, and if you want to grow, you're going to have problems. You got to expect that. You got to look for those because, like you said, there are opportunities to make you a hero. And if you shy away from that, or if something comes up and you don't make the phone call quickly, and you wait to tell them because you're scared, and you don't hit it head on, or you mislead them and lie or blame someone else, those are big no-nos, and you're going to hit rock bottom. You're going to have setbacks. So I guess there's ways that we can avoid setbacks in the first place by doing things the right way, coaching things, and hitting it head on when there's an issue, and setting proper expectations up front.
More money, more problems, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, but that is so important. One thing you said, that instead of waiting to call somebody if there's a problem. So I remember this specifically, how like you come in and, you get something urgent happening because, okay, this is happening with this customer, and the project manager is telling you like, you got to make this phone call. And then you get a phone call from your loan officer because something's not going right with this customer. And it's like those things that just like put a damper on your day. And then you're like, you're dreading to make that phone call because you're imagining the worst possible thing that could happen during that phone call.
Yep.
And so what you end up doing is you typically end up pushing it to the end of the day. You're like, okay, let me take care of all these other important things. And then when I get enough courage, when I come up with the right thing to say, I'm going to make that phone call. And usually what I found when I do make that phone call is that it wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. So now what I try to do is I try to do the hardest things first in my day. Like whatever it is that is bothering me or is giving me anxiety, I try to address that first, because typically it's not as bad as I thought it would be. And then I actually can relax and feel a lot better and get through the rest of my day.
Yep, 100%. So what we do here, we always, again, we're talking about avoiding setbacks and bouncing back from setbacks, but your prospecting or whatever you do to get your leads or your borrowers, your contacts, has to take priority over everything first and foremost. So if that's in the beginning of the day or whenever you do it, that is a hard, non-negotiable thing that has to happen every day to avoid your roller coasters that we talked about.
Yes.
And then you deal from there. After you get that done, then you can handle your problems, and you want to handle them quick. Unless it's an absolute emergency, you got to do your prospecting first. You got to do it. It's because people get putting fires out all day, and then their pipeline suffers. So you got to knock that stuff out first. And then the issues, right? Like you said, we have too little people in our head. I always talk about this. And oh, by the way, I have a group on Facebook called "What Are You Made Of" with Mike C-Roc. Just for your listeners, if they go there, I'll allow them into it. It's "What Are You Made Of" by Mike C-Roc on Facebook. It's a group.
Okay. I'll link to it, you guys, in the show notes.
I cover a bunch of stuff in there as well regarding these things as they come up in my day, and I try to relate it. But when you the whole thing is you have two little people in your head. One's a negative man or woman, and the other one's a positive man or woman, right? And I think I read that somewhere, but I've always used it. And when that negative man or woman starts talking up and giving you all the negative stuff that could happen, all the bad this and all the bad that, you got to just kind of stomp them. And one thing I always talk about, and I hear other people have negative this, that, guys, doesn't do any good. All you're doing is training yourself for the future to react the wrong way. And you're building yourself up. Like you said, it's not as bad as it is. So just rip the Band-Aid off. Say, I got this. I know what I'm made of. I can handle this, and knock it out. And you know what? There's a way to handle that when you call the buyer as well, is share with them what the issue is. and then just let them know how you're going to fix it. If they start going on and on and on, just be quiet and let them ramble to get all the stuff and feelings and emotions out of their way. Do not interrupt them. Don't argue with them. Don't anything. When they're done, I always do this. This is something that I still handle clients now. If there's a concern, a problem, or a real estate agent, I let them get it all out. And then when they're done, I wait to count to 3 because I don't want to interrupt them. I make sure they're done. And then I say, you know what? I get it. I understand how you feel. I've been in your shoes before. Just agreeing with them to get the conflict out of the way. And what I'm going to do for you is this, or how we're going to handle it is this. And if they start rambling again or firing again at you, you just sit back and let them get it out. Because if you don't do that or you interrupt them, you're going to create more conflict and more problems. And you don't take anything personally and keep your emotion out of it. As long as you know that and you know you're going to have problems sometimes and you expect that you're going to have problems sometimes, when it does happen, you know how to handle it. It's not a surprise. You say, I got this. And it's so much easier and it makes life easier. But the problem is too, there's not enough training on this. And a lot of companies don't have training on this. And that's what I was thinking to myself when 2017, I said, I got to get out here and talk to people and share this stuff that they're not getting from their employers. And there's that help thing again. I just want to help people do that. So yeah,
and guess what? If you're going to take things personally, you probably shouldn't be in sales to begin with, right?
That's right. But everybody goes through it. Everybody learns. Everybody's been new once, and not everybody has the awesomest, most best mentor, coach, or teacher to start out with. So a lot of times it's a learning by experience thing. And but even the biggest problem is people know that and they still do it. That's the thing that's the worst.
Yes. So okay. Speaking of a negative Nancy, so sometimes, I'm a very positive person. I always try to think of just good things. I'm definitely a big believer in when you begin to have negative thoughts, that they translate into actual reality of your life. So I always try to cut myself right off as soon as I start or like worrying about something, because if I feel like if I'm going to think about that way, I'm going to somehow actually make that come true. Like, I don't know if I'm, extreme with that or what, but I really do believe that. So it affects me when other people are negative around me. So if somebody had a bad day and maybe if it's your spouse, they come home and they're frustrated and it's like almost like this bad negative energy in the air, right? Or like sometimes we have that toxic coworker. So you have an office of 30 people that you manage. How do you deal with the negative Nancys in your space? Like, what happens if somebody calls you? We always have that one complainer friend that wants to call us and complain and complain and complain. How do you, without being completely rude and to be professional, how do you turn that around with the negative Nancy?
Well, again, culture, and we've done a fantastic job. I'm not taking 100% responsibility for the culture that we have. I set us on the right course, and my team bought in. And when we know there's no negativity allowed. If somebody gets it, we call them out on it. Everybody does. It's not just coming from me, or we get away from it. But it's got to be to the point where it's unreasonable that we don't listen to it. And everybody has to understand the importance of it. And it's about educating what actually happens in your brain when there's negative around you. So that's the start of it. But also, we've had in the past in our business where there was resentment from the fulfillment staff to the production staff because sales makes most of the money. And so there would be some resentment that the fulfillment staff was doing all the works, quote unquote. So we eliminated that by taking the roof off and the limits off of everybody's income potential. And I think that every company should allow every person in their company somehow to bring in business to generate revenue. One, they're going to see what salespeople deal with. And number two, they have no income limitations, and the people will not leave a company if they can make as much as they are willing and wanting to make. So that has changed the ballgame for our company. And our processors and loan officers get along great now. We have, we're human, we have our moments, but we don't tolerate negativity and comments. And the other thing we do is we have a sales meeting. I have 7 branches that are all in different locations. So we have like similar to a Zoom meeting, Microsoft team. We bring everyone up every Monday And we start our meeting every Monday with a quick name of a person on the team and what we're thankful for, something that they went above and beyond with the week before. And we
Love
keep it short and sweet to get through the whole group, of course, because as we grow, and we're growing massively, by the way, but as we go through, we may have to adapt that somehow as we get bigger, but it has changed the attitudes of everyone, because I've heard before where a processor would say, I feel like I'm unappreciated. Nobody ever says thank you. So when people now, they want to get their name called in that meeting. So each week they're trying to go above and beyond, out of their way to get their name called. And matter of fact, I just thought of an idea. Probably should run a contest of how many times your name's called in a sales meeting in a month.
Love
and
it.
have a contest for it, so people are competing to have their name. Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that.
All right, write it down.
I love talking to these because I start generating ideas.
Yes.
So that's huge. That's how we've done it. And you can tell people if they start giving you some negative stuff, say, listen, I'm not a soundboard. I appreciate it. I'm here for you to support you, but we have to look at this a different way. And if they don't get it, you don't need them around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way we view it. And we're very, very clear on that. We don't worry about people being upset about that, because at the end of the day, we have a target and a goal. And anything that goes against our target and our goal, we consider it our enemy's a bad word probably, but that's the best word I can come up with right now.
Love that. And you guys, I think it is so key to have positive people around you. And if you are dealing with somebody negative, you have to address it, because I really do believe, like, now that I'm so aware of it, I can almost see like a black cloud over somebody, and I can see how that black cloud starts to spread to other people suddenly. That negative energy just spreads, and you got to cut it out. Now, question for you, Michael. So say you're dealing with the situation. Actually, I had a question from one of my students on this. So say your builder got the pricing wrong, right? So maybe your competitors are selling very similar product to you, and they're in the same type of price range as you, but maybe you're offering all the basics, the vinyl, whatever, and your competitors are actually offering the granites, the upgrades. And how do you bring this up in a sales meeting without sounding negative? That was her concern, that she said she was afraid to sound negative. But I told her it's important that you do let your builder know what you're dealing with in order for you to be successful, right? Because if you're, right. I mean, no matter how great of a salesperson you are, you can certainly overcome some price difference from your competitor, but it cannot be, 20% or more. It's just impossible. Right. So how do you approach a topic like, hey, I'm overpriced, or just any topic where it could make you sound like a negative Nancy, where in reality you're trying to set things up so that you can actually be successful? Any tips?
Well, I think that wherever you work, you should be able to have an open communication and with whoever your manager is or the ownership. And if you don't, you need to figure out if that's the culture you want to be in first and foremost. So, because here's the thing, you don't have to be negative to understand that the place that you're working may not be the right place for you. So one, there's ways to handle things where there's price. You're never going to be the cheapest. Right. We all know that. There's ways to handle that. You got to sell value. You got to sell service. And to overcome the ones that are always just price choppers, it goes back to the topic of having a big pipeline and prospecting so massively at the top and really getting that through your head that you need so many leads that you can say to the client, listen, if you don't like the way we're presenting this now, and I'm talking about the real difficult ones, you're okay with that, saying that to them, like, hey, listen, this is what we have and why we're going to be providing the best service and less stress-free process, et cetera, et cetera. And you're okay if they walk at that point because you have more coming behind them. And that relieves a lot of stress. But as far as talking to the ownership, for example, in the mortgage industry, if we have a question about how our rates are competitive or what have you, we just bring it up and say, hey, listen, can we have a conversation about this? We want to look at what's on the market and how we're competing. And if we are higher, we need training and understanding of how to handle that. And so that's where it leads to, if they're not willing to change anything because of the business model that they have, and it might be the case that the overhead requires that. They just need to have training on how do we handle the situation then, and what do we say to the people when they bring this up to us. And in that case, then you'll know how to handle it. And if they say, you know what, we're not giving you training, again, that might not be the right place to work. So you can never feel stuck somewhere, guys. This is the biggest thing, is so many people feel like they're stuck in their job. If you're doing the right things and you have the right attitude and you don't feel the culture is right, and you're not being negative, but the culture's not there, and everybody knows what right culture is, then you need to explore other opportunities. And if you have to take a setback, that goes back to what the original question and the topic of this is. At that point, you have to put yourself into a situation where you go to Starbucks, you get a quad espresso, you get fired up with energy no, I'm just kidding. But really get fired up every day and figure out what you're made of and dig deep. And if you have to start over, just know that you're capable of doing it based on your prior experiences and your past. So that's my 3 cents on that.
Love it. So it sounds like you're big believer in taking your prior experiences and turning them into kind of like a rocket fuel to show you that you were able to do this, and that in the past you've done hard things and you can do even harder things going forward. That's not always going to be smooth sailing. And I think sometimes people who are very successful early on in their career, sometimes they end up falling the hardest because they didn't have those little setbacks, that they were always like a rock star and they were always put on a pedestal. And then when something happens, it's a lot more difficult for them to deal with that situation and move forward, rather than somebody who maybe always had to fight for it.
So if you think about this, and if everybody, when they first start or wherever they are right now, understand this. Everything that you go through is a training session for your future. So nothing is final except for death, right? That's the only thing that can really stop you is that. And so if you just understand that no matter what you're going through, good or bad, it's always training you for the future. And when you really wrap your head around that and get a good understanding of that, then it's easier to deal with. And you can expect setbacks and you can recover from them easier. And you know, hey, let me see, what can I learn from this? And let's face it, money is an issue that everybody has. But if you lose money on something, there's so much money on the planet. Yes. You got to stop thinking like a scarcity mindset. You can make up mistakes. You can make up things. It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. And you got to get that through your head. And once you understand that, you're not afraid to make mistakes. You don't want to make mistakes, but you'll learn from them. But you're not afraid to go after it. And if something were to happen, you know, I'm going to do this in such massive quantities that I'm going to make up for it.
Yes. Are you a fan of Grant Cardone's?
How did you know?
Just certain things you say. I was like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, he's my mentor. And I'm deeply involved with Cardone University with my team.
Yep.
Not to promote him, but you know, he's changed my life. And so when you get a mentor, you just have to immerse yourself in it like a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And to the point where he's moved into my house, my wife says, and it's crazy, but I want crazy results. It's obsessive, but I want obsessive results. So that's the way I look at things. I've always been like that. I just never had a label for it. And I thought I was crazy. I thought I was weird because I thought this way and everybody else is just moving along in their life. And now when I read the 10X rule, I guess about a year and a half ago, that gave me validation of everything I'm doing. And it's put me in hyperdrive now and my team in hyperdrive now. And
you guys, I'll link to that book. It's a life changer.
Yeah, you can get it free, I believe, if you
is it now?
In.
Okay.
You can get it free with just shipping and free ebook or shipping for the hard copy.
For those of us driving, I have it on audiobook and I re-listen to it periodically. And I think it's so interesting and refreshing because I think in today's society, so many messages that we hear that you don't need to work hard. Working hard is, it's like it needs to be easy, which I think to an extent you have to work smart for sure, right? Like you got to figure out, okay, what are the things that I can eliminate out of my life so that I am concentrating on the things that actually produce results. Like that I'm a big believer on. But I think that the value of hard work still 100% applies today. where, you know, a lot of people hear these stories of like overnight success, but again, they didn't see all these other struggles that the person went through and all the hustle and everything else. So it's definitely a refreshing book to read. And I think,
I just wrote a blog about that. It's called The Journey's Invisible. And by the way, I have my website. If you go to the Mike C-Roc with no K, the Mike C-Roc CROC.com. I have a blog post about that because you see a lot of successful people and you're not with them on their journey, and you don't understand what they went through, the mistakes that they made and all that. So when you make mistakes, you get down on yourself too much. It's not. One thing that we talk about all the time is that as long as you don't quit and as long as you don't give up, you can't fail. As long as you just keep coming back. If you think about a boxer, if he got knocked down and then he just keeps getting back up again and coming at the guy, that does something to that other boxer or the problem that you're dealing with. Eventually that problem figures out, this guy's not quitting, I better stop. And so I've never, and Grant says this all the time, I've never heard somebody say you work too much that was more successful than me.
Yes.
Right? So you think about that, and
Yep. So I think this is the perfect place to leave you guys off of, is that you don't fail until you stop. Right?
Amen.
100%. So Michael, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really appreciate your time. I will link all of your information in the notes. It's going to be under aniachrysanthon.com/067. And I'll link to Michael's website, his Facebook group, all of his social accounts, so you guys can follow him on social, check him out. And of course, if you can use Michael's mortgage company, maybe check it out as well. So what's the link for your mortgage company?
We're at nationslending.com, or we're on Facebook, Nations Lending Mid-Atlantic. I'm big time on social media. So Anya, first of all, thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you for having me. I appreciate that. And maybe I have a podcast called What Are You Made Of podcast with Mike C-Roc. It's starting. I put a couple episodes out already. I love doing this, and I look forward to maybe having you as a guest on mine.
I would love that.
To your listeners, I'm all over social media. I'd love to connect and engage with you. So please look me up, and look forward to helping you out in any way I can.
So you guys go ahead and subscribe to Michael's podcast right now. Let's give him a little boost, the iTunes boost that he's, so that's awesome. That's so exciting that you're starting your own podcast. Definitely an awesome way to connect with your audience. So Michael, thank you again for being on today. I look forward to connecting with you in the future, and I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Keep going. I love it.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for being a part of the What Are You Made Of podcast. So that you don't miss future episodes, please rate and subscribe to the What Are You Made Of podcast on your favorite listening or viewing apps, and follow me on your favorite social media platforms. I would love to hear your stories of past experiences and engage with you further.